Shabbat Shalom, everyone. We're gathered together in fellowship on the 23rd or the 22nd of the 5th month, depending on your reckoning of the Zadok or Enochian Hanok calendar that is found in the Dead Sea Scrolls and confirmed throughout Scripture. We're currently going over Irenaeus Against Heresies, but we had digressed a few weeks ago to read through a section of the Apostolic Constitutions called Against Heresies, it's called the Heresy section of the Apostolic Constitutions. And it was talking about Simon the magician and the things that came about after the time of our Mashiach and his emissaries. So we're continuing on with that, and we should finish, Abba willing, we'll finish this Shabbat. So we're currently on chapter 15. And the subtitle is that we ought not to re-immerse, nor to receive that baptism which is given by the unrighteous, which is not immersion, but a pollution. It says, be likewise contented with one immersion alone, that which is into the death of the master, not that which is conferred by wicked heretics, but that which is conferred by unblameable Kohanim, in the name of the Father, or Abba, and of the Son, and of the Kodesh Ruach. Netanyahu 28:19. All right, sorry about that. I had to start from the beginning. If I already read, we're just going to recap a little bit. But this is 15. It says, be likewise contented with one immersion alone, that which is into the death of the master, not that which is conferred by wicked heretics, but that which is conferred by unblameable Kohanim, or overseers. In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Kodesh Ruach. Netanyahu 28:19. And let not that which comes from the unrighteous be received by you, nor let that which is done by the righteous be disannulled by a second. For as there is one El, one Mashiach, and one Comforter, and one death of the master in the body, so let that immersion which is unto him be but one. But those that receive polluted immersion or baptism from the unrighteous will become partners in their opinions, for they are not Kohanim. For Elohim says to them, because you have rejected knowledge, I will also reject you from the office of a Kohen to me. And all knowledge is in Yahushua, in the Word. It's where we get our knowledge, our comprehension, and our chokmah, and all these things. So when we reject what's written, he rejects us. Nor indeed are those that are baptized by them initiated, but are polluted, not receiving the remission of sins, but the bond of impiety. And besides, they that attempt to baptize those already initiated impel the master afresh, slay him a second time, laugh at El, and ridicule Kodesh or set apart things, affront the Ruach, dishonor the set-apart blood of Mashiach as common blood, are impious against him that sent, him that suffered, and him that witnessed, meaning they're impious against our Abba, his Mashiach, and the Ruach, all mentioned as separate, not three in one. Nay, he that out of contempt will not be immersed shall be condemned as an unbeliever, and shall be reproached as ungrateful and foolish. For Yahuwah says, unless a man be immersed in water and of the Ruach, he shall by no means enter into the Malkuth Shemayim, or the reign of the heavens. Yahukanan 3:5. And again, he that believes and is immersed shall be delivered, but he that believes not shall be condemned or damned. Mark 16:16. Yet he says that when I am dying, Yeah, yet he that says, when I am dying, I will be immersed, lest I should sin and defile my immersion, is ignorant of Elohim and forgetful of his own nature. For do not delay to turn unto Yahuwah, for you know not what the next yom or day will bring forth. And you might not be aware, but Constantine, the one who dedicated his reign and the Hagia Sophia to Apollyon, if you'll remember, he's also the one that gave the crown of the Pontifex Maximus to Sylvester, whose name means the wild beast, and he went forth as a Nicolaitan conquering and to conquer. That was a second culmination of that advent of the white horse rider given a crown. The first would have been foreshadowing these events to come, but it would have been in Vespasian being given the reign in the year of the 4 Caesars. All of this stuff is revealed in the Anti-Mashiach for Dummies videos. But moving on, it says, and this part is a little off, you see. It says, do you also instruct your infants or children and bring them up in the nurture and admonition of Elohim? For, says he, suffer the little children to come unto me and forbid them not. And it says, it said, baptize, which cannot be done, as we must with our reason and intention believe and be immersed. Children are not held accountable. And furthermore, children are already given the reign. If you recall, our Mashiach said, forbid them not to come unto me, for such is the reign of the Shamayim. And he said, if we don't come to him as little children, we shall by no means enter in. So he gives many examples that the children are already given into the reign. It's when you become accountable as a man that you now have to do the things that he's required, and you're going to be judged for it. And this is just part of Yahuwah is righteous in everything. He does nothing evil ever. He's perfectly righteous in all of his intentions and all of the things that he does. This one's titled Concerning Books with False Inscriptions. Very important for us, especially believers in this time, because we have many writings. Some of them are attested to in history, both with the canons through history and with the advent of the Dead Sea Scrolls. Everything that was found there is worthy of us looking at. But there's also many other writings, the Nag Hammadi and other writings that are known to be Gnostic, and even some written later, like the Aquarian Gospel, as it's called. And all of that stuff is quite disastrous to our well-being. Here and elsewhere talks about how we can discern and figure out what is of him and what isn't. So it says, we have sent all these things to you that you may know our opinion, what it is, and that you may not receive those books which obtain in our name, but are written by the unrighteous. For you are not to attend to the names of the sent ones, but to the nature of the things and their settled opinions, meaning Yahuwah changes not. Right? For we know that Shimon or Simon and Cleobius and their followers have compiled poisonous books under the name of Mashiach and of his taught ones, and do carry them about in order to deceive you who love Mashiach, and us his servants. And among the ancients also some have written apocryphal books of Moshe, and Hanok, and Adam, and Yeshayahu, and Dawid, and Eliyahu, and of the 3 patriarchs, pernicious and repugnant to the truth. The same things even now have the wicked heretics done, reproaching the creation, marriage, providence, the begetting of children, the Torah, and the foretellers, inscribing certain barbarous names, and as they think of messengers, but to speak the truth, of demons, which suggest things to them. And the actual name for Apollyon That's the name that's in scripture. And quite like all of the names of false mighty ones there, he doesn't give you the direct name of them, but always a play on words or a pun that describes their character in the Hebrew. And it's usually of something to denote their worthlessness or wickedness. This one is literally Apollyon, which means Apollo the destroyer. The intention for everyone who follows after him. But the fact that he's known as a demon is all the way back from ancient. I mean, it was known in Greek. They were called demons because they were disembodied spirits. And the one that was called Apollyon, or the name that goes with that, was known also like the spirit of Python, if you will. Those were known as the false spirit of foretelling that was prevalent throughout the world, where they have their whole Greek mythology behind it. But the intention was that they would not believe the foretellings that he gave them, even though he was telling the truth and mixing it with error. So he was telling them things that would happen. There's a future judgment. There's other stuff going on, but they would not believe what they heard because they were giving in to the lusts of the flesh, essentially. But the fact that they're known as demons is all the way back in antiquity. Demons were disembodied spirits. They were quite familiar with, and Apollyon was actually called one. These things were actually called demons because they knew what they were back then. It's only later on that we get confused about these things. He says, which suggests things to them whose doctrine eschew or cast away from you, that you may not be partakers of the punishment due to those that write such things for the seduction and perdition of the trustworthy and unblameable taught ones of Yahushua. This is the matrimonial precepts concerning ministers. We have already said that a overseer or an overseer, an elder, and a minister, when they are constituted, must be but once married, whether their wives be alive or whether they be dead, and that it is not lawful for them, if they are unmarried when they are ordained, to be married afterwards, or if they be then married, to marry a second time, but to be content with that wife which they had when they came to ordination. We also appoint that the ministers and singers and readers and porters, the doorkeepers, shall be only once married. But if they entered into the clergy before they were married, we permit them to marry, if they have an inclination thereto, lest they sin and incur punishment. But we do not permit any one of the clergy to take to wife either a courtesan, or a servant, or a widow, or one that is divorced, as also the Torah says. And this is specifically about the injunction on what the sons of Aaron, the Kohanim and the Leviim, what they were allowed to do. They were always given more stringent instructions than the rest of the people. It's the same thing that's given to the sons of Aaron, though. They can't marry a harlot. They have to marry a daughter of their people that's a virgin. Or same thing, not a widow or no one divorced. But right here's a quote for it. It says, let the female minister be a pure virgin, or at the least a widow who has been but once married, trustworthy and well esteemed. Leviticus 21:7 and 14, and 1 Timothy 5:9. So chapter 18 says, receive the penitent, for this is the will of El in Mashiach. Instruct the instructed in the elements of religion or service, and then immerse them. Now, I don't know how familiar you are with these words, but religion, like regulation or regular, regalia, regal, these are all words that have similar meaning, or they came from the same word, regel, which is really your foot or to tread. It's where regal came to be, where sovereigns would tread upon the neck of their enemy with their foot. And then the regular regulations, or the regular path in which you walk, is the regulations that you keep and the religion that you have. It's all tied together based on that. But that regel is Hebrew for your foot or your tread. And that's actually the name of the star that's in Leo, or what they call the lion, right? And his foot is called regel, and it's on the head of the serpent. Or if I'm recalling correctly, it's Hydra is the constellation that he's treading upon. But that's where that comes from. And that's where sovereigns get their regalia and the regal and stepping on the necks of their enemies and doing all these things comes right from the stars and the Hebrew here. But moving on. And then immerse them. So teach the truth and then immerse. The same thing that we read in the Apostolic Constitutions in a different section, where it was talking about what the instructed are supposed to be taught and then how they're supposed to be immersed. It gives you the whole detail. Right here is just another witness for that. It says, eschew or cast away the atheistical heretics who are past repentance, and separate them from the trustworthy, and excommunicate them from the assembly of El, and charge the trustworthy to abstain entirely from them, and not to partake with them either in sermons or prayers. For these are those that are enemies to the assembly, and lay snares for it, who corrupt the flock and defile the heritage of Mashiach, pretenders only to Chokmah, and the vilest of men, concerning whom Shalomo the wise or prudent said, the wicked doers pretend to act piously. For, says he, there is a way which seems right to some, but the ends thereof look to the bottoms of Sheol, or the grave. Proverbs 14:12. And just so you're aware, anytime we're reading quotes from the original covenant and they don't sound like what you're familiar with, 9 times out of 10, that's because it's from the Septuagint version. These are they concerning whom Yahuwah declared his mind with bitterness and severity, saying that they are false Mashiachim, or false Mashiachs, and false teachers. Matniyahu 24:24. Who have blasphemed the Ruach of favor and done despite to the gift they had from him after the favor of immersion, to whom forgiveness shall not be granted, neither in this world, nor in that which is to come. Matniyahu 12:32, Hebrews 6:4-8, and 10:26-31. And right here is another witness that Simon and like Shaul, the first sovereign before Dawid, they were given the Ruach, and then because of their actions, it was taken from them, and repentance was no longer given. They had turned from the truth they had received, and then they were considered reprobate, or as Yehuda Iscariot was, the son of perdition, right? There's no more forgiveness for someone who turns from what they've had after they've been immersed without repentance. If you recall, in the recognitions of, in the Shepherd of Hermas, they were walking out a time where believers had turned aside. There was some issues, and he was giving room for them to return, but they had to count the cost and recognize it would be their life, for their eternal well-being would cost them this physical existence, and they became martyrs for that purpose. Everyone getting according to what they deserve. That's why some are saved for paradise without bodily harm, and some suffer in the flesh, but all that are his reflect the truth. That's the important thing. Everyone will reflect the truth eventually, but those who intentionally do his will reflect the truth. And if you're not malicious in your intentions, like Jacob, anytime you do wrong, you're going to be expediently corrected for it. And that's how we can recall that we're his children and not illegitimate, also mentioned in Hebrews. But it says, who are both more wicked than the Yahudim and more atheistical than the nations, who blaspheme the El over all and tread underfoot his son, and do despite to the doctrine of the Ruach, who deny the words of El, or pretend hypocritically to receive them, to the affronting of Elohim, and the deceiving of those that come among them, who abuse the Kodesh scriptures, or set apart scriptures. And as for righteousness, they do not so much as know what it is, who spoil the assembly of Elohim, as the little foxes do the vineyard, whom we exhort you to avoid, lest you lay traps for your own inner beings. And the foxes in the vineyard is something that's alluded to in a few different places. That's from the Song of Solomon, and you also see something about foxes in the field in the time of Samson, who was of the tribe of Dan. All these things are important, but we'll continue. For he that walks with the Hakam, or prudent man, shall be prudent, but he that walks with the foolish shall be known. Proverbs 13:20. For we ought neither to run along with a thief, nor put in our lot with an adulterer, since set apart David says, Yahuwah, I have hated them that hate you, and I am withered away on account of your enemies. I hated them with a perfect hatred, and they were to me as enemies. Psalms 130:21 through 22. And El reproaches Yahushaphat with his friendship towards Ahab, and his league with him and with Ahaziahu by Yonah the foreteller, saying, are you in friendship with a sinner, or do you aid him that is hated by Yahuwah? For this cause the wrath of Yahuwah would be upon you suddenly, but that your heart is not perfect with Yahuwah. For this cause Yahuwah has spared you, yet are your works shattered, and your ships broken to pieces. 2 Chronicles 18 through 20. I didn't have the chapter there, I apologize. But right here you can see, even if you're walking perfectly before your maker, it's because we in ignorance are associating with those that he hates, or we're doing things with those that are involved with stuff that are unprofitable, that our things come to pieces and our works are not made manifest and finished. So another way that that's spoken of is in the recognitions of Clement, where Asita and Nicola are speaking before Clement to their father and a group of men, and they're explaining how, because we are surrounded by people that are not living right, calamities come upon the unrighteous and the righteous. But for those that are righteous, it's a trial to make them more perfect to the time of arbitration, and to be made perfect for the ever after. But for the wicked, it's a separation from future baraka starting then, and a right condemnation for their future because of the way they behave in it. Because the calamities in this existence, the wicked will blaspheme and complain, while the righteous praise their maker. It says, eschew therefore their fellowship, and estrange yourselves from their friendship. For concerning them did the foreteller declare and say, it is not lawful to rejoice with the unrighteous, says Yahuwah. For these are hidden wolves, dumb dogs that cannot bark, who at present are but few, but in process of time, when the end of the world draws near, will be more in number and more troublesome. Of whom said Yahuwah, will the son of Adam, when he comes, find belief on the earth? Luke 18:8. And because iniquity shall abound, the love of many shall wax cold, and there shall come false Mashiachs and false foretellers, and shall show signs in the Shamayim, so as if it were possible to deceive the elect, from whose deceit Elohim through Yahushua Mashiach, who is our expectation, will deliver us. For we ourselves, as we pass through the nations and confirm the assemblies, curing some with much exhortation and healing words, restored them again when they were in a certain way to death. But those that were incurable we cast out from the flock, that they might not infect the lambs, which were found with a scabby disease, but might continue before Yahuwah Elohim pure and undefiled, sound and unspotted. And this we did in every city, everywhere, through the whole world, and have left to you, the overseers, and to the rest of the Kohanim, this very Yachad, or united into one doctrine, worthily and righteously, as a memorial or confirmation to those who have believed in Elohim. And we have sent it by our fellow minister Clement, our most trustworthy and intimate son in Yahuwah, together with Barnabas and Timothy, our most dearly beloved son. Now, I just want to stop right here for a moment. It mentions that Clement was the one that was being trusted to make copies of this right here, and he was publishing it to the different assemblies that were built. In the recognitions of, or in the Shepherd of Hermas, we also have it written that Clement was given to publish copies of that and send it to the different assemblies. And then, if you recall, the recognitions of Clement was the teaching and preaching of Kepha, as Clement wrote and sent back to Jacob. So this was something that he was entrusted with doing quite a bit, even before he was a full-on believer. I mention this because scholars, for whatever reason, don't want to get into that really, but they will tell you that the Apostolic Constitutions was written or compiled sometime after the 300s or around the 300s, and not actually contemporary with our Mashiach or his emissaries. When right here you can see written of itself, it says plainly otherwise. Clement was ordained as the overseer of Rome at the death of Kepha around the 60s, or the time of Nero, so 64, 63. And then he was a martyr himself in the 90s, a little bit before Yahuchanan, or a little bit after Yahuchanan wrote Revelation. So there's a lot of this stuff that isn't commonly known, but if you just look at the history and you see what is plainly written, it's quite plain, and it's contrary to what is normally put out, which is par for the course if you're familiar with what we've been learning. But let's continue here. It says, together with Barnabas and Timothy, our most dearly beloved son, and the genuine Mark, together with whom we recommend to you also Titus and Luke, Jason and Lucius, and Sosipater, by whom also we exhort you in Yahuwah to abstain from your old conversation, vain bonds, separations, observances, distinction of meats, and daily washings. For old things are passed away. Behold, all things have become new. 2 Corinthians 5:17 and 1 Timothy 4:1-5. If you remember, the meats, we're no longer supposed to consider anything unclean. Like you can touch, if you accidentally touch a pigskin book, you're not going to have to wash yourself and make sacrifices to be cleansed from it. those things were done away with. They were all added bonds from transgression. But what's considered food, as mentioned in 1 Timothy, is set apart by prayer and the word of Elohim. And then to find out what food is all throughout the original covenant instructions. None of that was ever done away with. And that's why it says in this particular writing that the added bonds were done, but not all of them. You still keep the feasts. We still, although not exactly in the same way they were established. And then we still keep the other instructions that are for our benefit and profit in all things that he never rescinded them. We're going to get into detail right here about just what it is that was put away with. So please bear with me. And then if you have any questions, you can ask as we go. It says, to those that speak evil of the Torah, for since you have known El through Yahushua Mashiach and all his teachings, as it has been from the beginning, that he gave a plain Torah or law to assist the law of nature, such a one as is pure, delivering, and kadosh, or set apart, in which his own name was inscribed, perfect, which is never to fail, being complete in 10 commands, unspotted, converting inner beings, which when the Hebrews forgot, he put them in mind of it by the foreteller Malachi, saying, remember the Torah of Moshe, the man of El, who gave you in charge commandments and ordinances, which Torah is so very set apart and righteous that even our deliverer, when on a certain time he healed one leper, and afterwards 9, said to the first, go show yourself to the high Kohen and offer the gift which Moshe commanded for a testimony unto them. And afterwards to the 9, go show yourselves to the Kohanim. Luke 17:14. For he nowhere has dissolved the Torah, as Simon pretends, but fulfilled it. For he says, one yod or one tittle shall not pass from the Torah until all be fulfilled. For, says he, I come not to dissolve the Torah, but to fulfill it. For Moshe himself, who was at once the lawgiver, and the high Kohen, and the foreteller, and the sovereign, and Eliyahu, the zealous follower of the foretellers, were present at our Yahuwah's transfiguration in the mountain, and witnesses of his incarnation and his sufferings, and as the intimate friends of Mashiach, but not as enemies and strangers, whence it is demonstrated that the Torah is pleasant and kadosh, or set apart, as also the foretellers. Now, the Torah is the 10 commandments, which Yahuwah promulgated to them with an audible voice before the people made that calf which represented the Egyptian Apis, which this Apis comes from the name for the hidden one in the Egyptian language, which is tied to Saturn, Kronos. It's all ties back to Nimrod, Semiramis, and that errant religious system that was brought in at that time, what later became known as the mystery religions. It all ties back to the beginning buddings of error. But it says, the people made the calf that represented the Egyptian Apis, and the Torah is righteous, and therefore is it called the Torah, because right rulings are thence made according to the Torah of nature, which the followers of Simon abuse, supposing they shall not be arbitrated or judged thereby, and so shall escape punishment. This Torah is pleasant, set apart, and such as lays no compulsion in things positive. For he says, if you will make me an altar, you shall make it of earth. It does not say make one, but if you will make. It does not impose a necessity, but gives leave to their own free liberty. For Elohim does not stand in need of sacrifices, being by nature above all want. But knowing that as of old, Abel, beloved of El, and Noach, and Abraham, and those that succeeded them, without being required, but only moved of themselves by the Torah of nature, did offer sacrifice to Eloah, out of a grateful mind. So he did now permit the Hebrews, not commanding, but if they had a mind, permitting them, and if they offered from a right intention, showing himself pleased with their sacrifices. Therefore he says, if you desire to offer, do not offer to me as to one that stands in need of it, for I stand in need of nothing, for the world is mine and the fullness thereof. But when this people became forgetful of that, and called upon a calf as Elohim instead of the true El, and to him did ascribe the cause of their coming out of Egypt, saying that these are your mighty ones, Yisrael, which have brought you out of the land of Egypt. And when these men had committed wickedness with the similitude of a calf that eats hay, and denied Elohim who had visited them by Moshe in their afflictions, and had done signs with his hand and rod, and had smitten the Egyptians with 10 plagues, who had divided the waters of the Reed Sea into 2 parts, who had led them in the midst of the water, as a horse upon the dry ground, who had drowned their enemies and those that laid in wait for them, who at Marah had made sweet the bitter fountain, and who had brought water out of the sharp rock till they were satisfied, who had overshadowed them with a pillar of cloud on account of the immoderate heat, and with a pillar of fire which enlightened and guided them when they knew not which way they were to go, who gave them manna from Shamayim, and gave them quails for flesh from the sea, who gave them the Torah in the mountain, whose voice had vouchsafed to them to let them hear, whose voice he had vouchsafed to let them hear. Him did they deny, and said to Aharon, make us mighty ones who shall go before us. And they made a molted calf, and sacrificed to an idol. Then was Elohim angry as being ungratefully treated by them, and bound them with bonds which could not be loosed, with a mortifying burden and a hard collar. And no longer said, if you make, but make an altar, and sacrifice perpetually, for you are forgetful and ungrateful. Offer burnt offerings, therefore, continually, that you may be mindful of me. For since you have wickedly abused your power, I lay a necessity upon you for the time to come. And I command you to abstain from certain meats, and I ordain you the distinction of clean and unclean creatures, although every creature is tob, as being made by me. And I appoint you several separations, purgations, frequent washings and sprinklings, several purifications, and several times of rest. And if you neglect any of them, I determine that punishment which is proper to the disobedient, that being pressed and galled by your collar, you may depart from the error of polytheism, and laying aside that these are your mighty ones, Yisrael, you may be mindful of that. Shema Yisrael, Yahuwah your Elohim is one Yahuwah, and may run back again to that Torah which is inserted by me in the nature of all men, that there is only one El in Shamayim and on earth, and to love him with all your heart, and with all your might, and with all your mind, and to fear none but him, nor to admit the names of other mighty ones into your mind, nor to let your tongue utter them out of your mouth. He bound them for the hardness of their hearts, that by sacrificing and resting and purifying themselves and by similar observances, they might come to the knowledge of El, who ordained these things for them. So here we go. This is that we who believe in Mashiach are under favor and not under the servitude of that additional law or Torah. But Ashereh, or happy are your eyes, for they see, and your ears, for they hear. Netanyahu 13:16. Yours, I say, who have believed in the one El, not by necessity, but by a sound comprehension, in obedience to him that called you. For you are released from the bonds and freed from the servitude. For he says, I call you no longer servants, but friends. For all things that I have heard of my Father have I made known unto you. Yahuchanan 15:15. For to them that would not see nor hear, not for the want of those senses, but for the excess of their wickedness, I gave statutes that were not Tob, and arbitrations whereby they would not live or exist. Ezekiel 20:25. They are looked upon as not pleasant, as burnings and a sword, and medicines, or as medicines are esteemed enemies by the sick, and impossible to be observed on account of their obstinacy, whence also they brought death upon them, being not obeyed. And this is just talking about the added bonds. They were required to do their perpetual offerings and their rituals and all the things, compelled to, and every time they didn't, the curses of the covenant would come upon them to teach them. And so they kept going under this rinse and repeat, error, rinse, repeat cycle until they got it right. And then when the remnant was ready, he came. It's the same picture we're looking for right here. It says, you therefore are Ashereh, or happy, who are delivered from the curse. For Mashiach, the Ben of El, by his coming has confirmed and completed the Torah, but has taken away the additional precepts, although not all of them, yet at least the more grievous ones, having confirmed the former and abolished the latter, and has again set the free will of man at liberty, not subjecting him to the penalty of temporal death, but giving instructions to him according to another constitution. Meaning that it's not temporal chastisement that he's going to correct us with. This is eternal. We're doing things for eternal rewards now. Wherefore he says, if any man will come after me, let him come. Netanyahu 16:24. And again, will you also go away? Yahuchanan 6:67. And besides, before his coming, he refused the sacrifices of the people, while they frequently offered them, when they sinned against him, and thought he was to be appeased by sacrifices, but not by repentance. For thus he speaks, why do you bring me frankincense from Seba, and cinnamon from a remote land? Your burnt offerings are not acceptable, and your sacrifices are not sweet to me. And afterwards, gather your burnt offerings together with your sacrifices and eat flesh. For I did not command you, when I brought you out of the land of Mitzrayim, concerning burnt offerings and sacrifices. Yirmiyahu 7:21 and 22. And he says by Yeshayahu, to what purpose do you bring me a multitude of sacrifices? Says Yahuwah, I am full of burnt offerings of rams, and I will not accept the fat of lambs, and the blood of bulls and of goats. Nor do you come to appear before me, for who has required these things at your hands? Do not go on to tread my courts any more. If you bring me fine flour, it is vain. Incense is an abomination unto me. Your new months and your Sabbaths and your great Yom, I cannot bear them. Your fasts and your rests and your feasts, my inner being hates them. I am overfull of them. And he says it by another, depart from me the sound of your hymns and the psalms of your musical instruments. I will not hear. And Shemuel says to Shaul, when he thought to sacrifice, obedience is better than sacrifice, and hearkening than the fat of rams. For behold, Yahuwah does not so much delight in sacrifice as in obeying him. And he says by Dawid, I will take no calves out of your house, nor he-goats out of your flock. If I should be hungry, I would not tell you, for the whole world is mine, and the fullness thereof. Shall I eat the flesh of bulls or drink the blood of goats? Sacrifice to Elohim the sacrifice of praise, and pay your vows to the Most High. And in all the scriptures, in like manner, he refuses their sacrifices on account of their sinning against him. For the sacrifices of the impious are an abomination with Yahuwah, which is in the Proverbs, since they offer them in an unlawful manner. In the letter of Aristes, which is the letter that Aristes wrote to a friend about the making of the Septuagint, when he was questioning the High Kohen about different things concerning the Torah, he explained that when you make an offering, it's not just the animal that's being offered, but it's your own being, your own inner being, and all that you are being offered up to your maker. So if you are doing wickedly or not right before your maker, it's literally an abomination or an abominable offering, even if the animal is otherwise perfect. But it says, and again, their sacrifices are to them as bread of lamentation. All that eat of them shall be defiled. He therefore before his coming, if therefore before his coming he sought for a clean heart and a contrite ruach more than sacrifices, much rather would he abrogate those sacrifices, I mean those by blood, when he came. Yet he so abrogated them as that he first fulfilled them. For he was both circumcised and sprinkled, and offered offerings and whole burnt offerings, and made use of the rest of their customs. And he that was the Torah giver became himself the fulfilling of the Torah, not taking away the Torah of nature, but abrogating those additional laws that were afterwards introduced, although not all of them neither. How Mashiach became a fulfiller of the Torah, and what parts of it he put a period to, or changed, or transferred. For he did not take away the Torah of nature, but confirmed it. For he that said in the Torah, Yahuwah your Elohim is one Yahuwah, the same says in the Besorah, that they might know you, the only true El. Yahuchanan 17:3. And he that said, you shall love your neighbor as yourself, Leviticus 19:18, says in the glad tidings, renewing the same precept, a new commandment I give unto you, that you love one another. Yahuchanan 13:34. He who forbade murder does now forbid causeless anger. Netanyahu 5:22. He that forbade adultery does now forbid all unlawful lust. He that forbade stealing now pronounces him most happy who supplies those that are in want out of his own labors. Luke 12:31-38 and Acts 20:35. He that forbade hatred now pronounces him prosperous or happy that loves his enemies. Netanyahu 5:7. He that forbade revenge now commands long-suffering. Netanyahu 5:43. Not as if righteous revenge were an unrighteous thing, but because long-suffering is more excellent. Because long-suffering is part of love, and love never fails and covers all transgression. Nor did he make laws to root out our natural passions, but only to forbid the excess of them. Netanyahu 5:38. He who commanded to honor our parents was himself subject to them. He who had commanded to keep the Shabbat by resting thereon for the sake of meditating on the laws has now commanded us to consider the Torah of creation and of providence every yom, and to return thanks to Elohim. Now, I can't tell if this has been messed with at all. Just so you know, we are still enjoined to keep the Shabbat on the 7th yom of the week, but it is true that believers are enjoined to come together every yom, morning and evening. The instructions are in the Apostolic Constitutions. So this isn't inaccurate. And you can see that even in the common scriptures, where those that lived in Yerushalayim, when it was the time of the incense or prayer, you had the Kohen doing his service and the multitude that were gathered around outside partaking of it. So the pattern was already in the original covenant, but it was made full later on and meant for all the assembly spread throughout the world. It says, he abrogated circumcision when he had himself fulfilled it. For he it was to whom the inheritance was reserved, who was the expectation of the nations. Bereshit or Genesis 49:10. He who made a Torah for swearing rightly and forbade perjury has now charged us not to swear at all. Netanyahu 5:33. He has in several ways changed immersion, sacrifice, the kahuna, and the el-breath service, which was confined to one place. For instead of yamim or daily immersions, he has given one or only one, which is into his death. Instead of one tribe, he has appointed that out of every nation the best should be ordained for the kahuna, and that not their bodies should be examined for blemishes, but their religion and their lives. Instead of a bloody sacrifice, he has appointed that reasonable and unbloody mystical one of his body and blood, which is performed to represent the death of the master by symbols. And this is my own thing. He said he gave us praise as an offering as well. And this may be a translation issue. I was mentioning this because of the penchant for the Nicolaitan usurpation that has denied our Mashiach is come in the flesh. It's all about taking communion or with the thing that they currently do, which is separate of that, the transfiguration or the transmutation that they believe in. So I don't want to get too far into that. We'll just continue. It says, instead of the el-breath service confined to one place, he has commanded and appointed that he should be esteemed from sun rising to sun setting in every place of his dominion. He did not therefore take away the Torah from us, but the bonds. For concerning the Torah, Moshe says, you shall meditate on the word which I command you, sitting in your house and rising up and walking in the way. And David says, his delight is in the Torah of Yahuwah, and in his Torah he will meditate Yom and Lila. For everywhere would he have us subject to his Torot or instructions, but not transgressors of them. For, says he, happy are the undefiled in the way, who walk in the Torah of Yahuwah. Happy are they that search out his testimonies. With their whole heart shall they seek him. And again, happy are we, Yisrael, because those things that are pleasing to El are made known to us, which is from Baruch 4, verse 4. And Yahuwah says, if you know these things, happy are you if you do them. Yahukanan 13:17. that it pleased Yahuwah that the law of righteousness should be demonstrated by the Romans. Right here, you're going to see this is a little off. But I put this in my own words in the bracket here. It says this title and the following section are corrupted, as Rome is the fourth beast, aka the beast out of the sea, and the Catholic Church is the scarlet woman riding the beast, the mother of harlots and abominations of the earth. We are pleaded with to come out of her for our own well-being. What this originally said is hidden for now, but kept for us all not to be ignorant of what he has allowed and the consequences of poor choices, adding and taking away from what is written. We are to turn the other cheek, not punish the bad. And that's what we'll read about in just a moment here. It says, nor does he desire that the Torah of righteousness should only be demonstrated by us, but he is pleased that it should appear and shine by means of the Romans. For these Romans, believing in Yahuwah, left off their polytheism and unrighteousness and entertained the good, or tob, and punished the bad. But they hold the Yahudim under tribute and do not suffer them to make use of their own ordinances. And this right here is why we have in the book of Gad the Seer, chapter 2, a rebuke of Edom, also known as the Kittim, who is in the north of the sea, and they're usurping the position of being the bride of our Mashiach and all the things that they said and do. It was 1,000 years before it happened, it was rebuked by Gad the Seer. But it says, because indeed they drew servitude upon themselves voluntarily when they said, we have no sovereign but Caesar, Yahuchanan 19:15. And this is also why anyone who says that the Yahudim are really the ones, like the whole Zionist movement is really the ones that are in charge and running things, they don't take into account what scripture says here or in the common scriptures and in the other writings, but they'll take what they can find outside of it and feed their own opinions. In the common scripture, you have them 3 times saying, we have no sovereign but Caesar. And so he gave them what they wanted and they became subject to the beast. And all throughout since that time, you can see them being the unfortunate stooge for them. And you can see it over and over again. Einstein, there's one. And then in the martyrdom of Polycarp, it says the Yahudim were the first and the most zealous to go grab the sticks to burn him with, but they weren't the ones responsible. They were just assisting. The Rothschilds are the same way. And all these other ones that are put up as those go to Yahudim that are doing stuff, they're working for Rome. And you can see that right here. It says, and if we do not slay Mashiach, all men will believe in him, and the Romans will come and will take away both our place and nation. Yahuchanan 11:48. And so they foretold unwittingly, for accordingly the nations believed on him, and they themselves were deprived by the Romans of their power and of their legal worship, and they have been forbidden to slay whom they please and to sacrifice when they will. Meaning, the context here is in Josephus or Yahusuf's War of the Yahudim and Antiquities of the Yahudim. He writes about it. He goes into detail about the privileges given to the Yahudim and their land by the different successive beast reigns that had ruled over them. But during the time of the Romans, before Vespasian came in and Titus came in and destroyed the place, they were allowed to slay any man who went beyond the wall, the partition wall of the Hikel. It was warned in Roman, Greek, and Hebrew that any man that's not of the Yahudim or circumcised beyond that point, they forfeit their life. And they were given leave to do that. And then the worship and offerings as they were allowed unmolested until they were taken out. Titus came through and all of that was put an end to. This is wherefore they are accursed, as not able to perform the things they are commanded to do. For says he, cursed be he that does not continue in all things that are written in the book of the Torah to do them. That's in Deuteronomy. And if you remember, that's quoted by Shaul in Galatians. Anyone who does not of the Yahudim or any of the 12 tribes, it doesn't matter if you were in the land or not, all of them that were partakers where their fathers swore an oath to hear and do, both they and their children forever. That means all the 12 tribes that were partakers, and every one of us that are literal seed of Abraham are obligated to partake, because if we don't partake of his covenant when he came, the renewed one, we automatically fall back to the first, which brings us under those curses. And if you remember, cursed is everyone who hangs from a tree, which is why he became a curse for us, and we were able to be removed from having the curse applied to us. The ones that reject him, though, of all of the 12 tribes, not just the Yahudim, are still under the curses of not being able to be obedient to that first covenant. The rest of the world, however, is not. So there is a distinction. This is now it is impossible in their dispersion while they are among the heathen for them to perform all things in their Torah. For the El-breathed Moshe forbids both to rear an altar out of Yerushalayim and to read the Torah out of the bounds of Yahudah. And both of those injunctions were in the first 5 books, I believe Deuteronomy specifically. Let us therefore follow Mashiach, that we may inherit his birakot, or blessings. Let us walk after the Torah and the foretellers by the Besorah. Let us eschew or cast away the worshippers of many mighty ones, and the murderers of Mashiach, and the murderers of the foretellers, and the wicked and atheistical heretics. Let us be obedient to Mashiach as to our sovereign, as having authority to change several constitutions, and having as a legislator chokmah, or wisdom, to make new constitutions in different circumstances, yet so that everywhere the Torot, or instructions of nature, be immutably preserved. I don't know if this is part of it or not, or if that was added afterwards. Let me check real quick. Oh, I don't know. I think this is the next section that we didn't finish, so hold on a moment. All right, so time constrains us, and we're going to wrap things up for this Shabbat, but we will finish, Abba willing, section 5 next week, and then we will go back to Irenaeus Against Heresies and see what he has to say from there. He still goes on into a lot of details about a lot of the Gnostic error, and then also the proper doctrine, which is really the part that we want to look at. So thank you all for your time, and you all have a wonderful Shabbat and the rest of your week. Shavua Tov.